Grown up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. As part of my responsibilities to ensure the fitness of nominees before any of the committees on which I sit, I asked the following two initial questions. First is, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
We received your testimony late yesterday, and you noted that, and quote, President Trump's energy dominance vision will end wars abroad, end quote. And President Trump has directed you to expand oil and gas drilling on a massive scale, which will lead to increased burning of fossil fuels. Now, the scientific consensus is that burning fossil fuels is a primary human cause of climate change. In 2017, then Secretary of Defense James Mattis, appointed by then President Trump, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, quote, climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating, end quote. In 2014, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel said that climate change is a critical national security threat and a threat multiplier. Now, these are two secretaries of defense. They know something about war. Were you aware that they testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on a number of times that burning more fossil fuel is actually going to not result in the end of wars, but could very well exacerbate and cause wars? Were you aware of this testimony?
Senator, no, I'm not aware of that specific testimony, but I do know that, that within fossil fuels, the concern has been about emissions, and within emissions, we have the technology to do things like carbon capture to eliminate harmful emissions.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you have military leaders who acknowledge that climate change is a major issue. And for you to take the position that, that you're going to engage in active actions that will result in the burning of more fossil fuel, it's troubling.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Burgum, good to see you. I think that there's a big theme here about public lands. And I join my colleagues, the ranking member and senator from Nevada, who've asked you about the selling of public lands. But we've already had this debate here. We had a very big debate here. So my state, obviously, we like public lands. It's a juggernaut of an economy. So when you think of our state, you think of ports and parks, and you think of $22 billion and over 200,000 jobs. So it's big money to us. So we led a fight with many of our colleagues on this committee to get permanent funding for LWCF, to get it reauthorized and permanent funding. In fact, this, if you'll hold that up, is an actual quote from the President of the United States during the big battle. He said, I'm calling on Congress to send me a bill that permanently funds LWCF and restores our parks. I'll sign it into law. It will be historic, and it will be for our public lands. Okay, so that, I was there, I was at the bill signing. I know what it says. It basically says you have to do acquisition. It is setting in law the amount of money that should be spent on acquisition. So when we're talking here this morning, we're all amazed that you seem to be putting forth a budget that is basically saying, I don't want to acquire, I want to actually sell public lands. What we figured out as a coalition of people, hunters, fishermen, outdoor recreationists, travel and tourism people, we figured out that it's a juggernaut of an economy, and we want to grow it. And we were able to get President Trump to sign a bill. So now your budget, and I asked you about this at your confirmation hearing, I asked you specifically whether, if confirmed, you said, I will implement the law as enacted by Congress. Well, the law enacted by Congress basically says that you have to spend 40% of this LWCF funds and make acquisition. It doesn't say sell public lands, it says acquire lands. So I don't know how you're proposing a budget that basically is going in the opposite direction of what was, let me refresh my memory, 60 sponsors in the Senate, 254 in the House. This was not a little decision. This was putting to bed this notion that, oh, it's either I'm going to fix some roads in our forest or I'm going to do land acquisition. Now, I get, even the chairman, he and I have had many conversations, as did his former colleague from Utah, Mr. Bishop. We've had many conversations about LWCF in the past. I get some of their issues that they have brought up about LWCF, but Congress voted and President Trump signed the law. Now we're asking you to implement it. And so I want to understand how you're proposing anything other than following the Dingell Act.
Well, certainly we'll continue and we'll follow the law, and I think that what we're having here is we shouldn't be confused that two things can happen at the same time, which is, and it's about which lands and which acquisitions, because 40% of the LWCF is a pretty small number relative to the scale. I mean, it's meaningful, hundreds of millions of dollars, but the opportunity for us to accelerate purchases, say, of infill and fill out the squares where we might be acquiring land for the federal government that is a private inholding inside of a national park.
We do it all the time. One of the biggest things we used LWCF for is because the federal government kept having to spend money because a road washed out.
Yes.
In accessing Mount Rainier. So we basically acquired more land, built the road on a different thing, so we weren't paying $250,000 every few years. So we're all for that.
Yeah, and
we're for following the Dingell Act, following the law of the Great Outdoors Act, and making sure that we are actually doing acquisition. Why? Because we have figured out, I think somebody said during that time, that it was the third biggest industry behind finance and healthcare. So we figured out that it is a big economic engine for our nation. So we want to see it. Now, I get that you have people here who didn't succeed in that battle and who may not believe that, but this was bipartisan, bicameral, and we need that support. I want to just
I'm just saying it's both of these things can happen at the same time. You can take LWCF
Your
lands.
budget doesn't say that, and I think it's heading to a catastrophe, so that's why I'm bringing it up. On the fire point, we have a big fire in Cle Elum right now. They aren't getting the direction. I hear what you just described as governor and the issues, but this is where we're heading. This is where we are now. This is where we're going to be, what is this, September? All of this in red. So we have a fire in Cle Elum now, and we need direction. We need to know. My constituents want to know what are people going to do to help coordinate with Interior and the Forest Service. We need to know now. So if you could help us with that, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Hoyle, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, and I'd like to continue on this line of discussion. I represent Oregon's 4th Congressional District, so the central and south coast of Oregon, and just over half of my district is federal lands, and Oregon's unique in that we have a checkerboard pattern of forest land ownership because of a history of parcels owned by the Oregon and California railroads. And so we have Forest Service, BLM, state, private, and tribal ownership all in this checkerboard pattern with all very different forest management practices. So public lands management, including public access to our lands, forest stewardship, fish and species management, and at this time the most critical issue is wildfire prevention and management. And we can disagree on the cause, but the fact is that Western Oregon has become hotter and drier, and there's a greater danger of urban conflagrations that are putting my constituents' lives at risk. And these are facts I'd love to work with you on and address those issues. The other issues that we know, and there are issues with FEMA, no doubt, but it's being gutted, and as a our states can no longer count on the federal government to come in and provide the needed capacity and expertise during natural disasters. And it's concerning given the scale and frequency of major national disasters. I mean, we had 1 million acres burn in 2020 in Oregon, so it's a little terrifying. I'd like to ask you about the administration's plan to transfer the fire responsibilities to the new consolidated Interior Department, and specifically, what I don't want to see is something broken before we have a plan to put something new together. So, briefly.
Yes, the proposal that's in this budget would give us this year to work on plans integration with state, tribal, all the different agencies, because we've got U.S. Fish and Wildlife, national parks, BLM, in addition to U.S. Forest Service, all have these federal agencies. So we'd have an opportunity to get input from all of those entities this year, with the idea that when we go into next year's firefighting season, that we would have better coordination. But when we use the word, I know the words like move and transfer, but people will still be operating under their same brands, but we have to have unification around the.
So just thank you. What I would like you to commit to, if you would, is to work in a bipartisan way to have those of us Democrats who represent public lands and forest lands at the table in a real and authentic way where we also have a voice.
Well, yeah, the fire doesn't know whether it's on
That's
a
exactly
blue or
right.
red district, or whether it's on, it doesn't know whether it's on tribal or BLM or federal,
Okay.
so it's.
So, and with that, I do want to talk about federal employees. Right now, we don't have the people to protect my district in fire season because of the haphazard gutting of the federal workforce. They fired people up and down the chain that maybe didn't have wildland firefighter in front of their name, but they actually get pulled in to do that work or do the support work. And now they're being begged to come back. And why would they come back to a place where literally Russell Vought has said he wants federal workers to feel traumatized? When they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they increasingly are viewed as villains. We want their funding to be shut down. We want them put in trauma. We had funding freezes for our private partners that are doing the work in both prevention and firefighting. They just immediately closed down our Job Corps, where we had these young, troubled youths that were getting job skills out in the woods, doing fuels reduction, and they're not doing that work anymore. I'm all for creating efficiencies in government, but you need people to do the job, specifically in the mid-level incident command centers. So I just want to say you have to treat workers well in order for them to show up. And I don't want to privatize our federal workforce, but we have issues in contracting. I've talked to Senator Sheehy, and specifically, we had 200 unable to fill calls last year in Oregon because of the system that we use, trying to get people that are the cheapest as opposed to people that are the closest, and we lost land, we lost homes, and next time we'll lose lives. We need more efficiency. There are ways that we can do this, restoring regional local dispatching for all resources, relying on states, and you know, there are a number of things. I would love to work with you on that. As I said, I've talked to Senator Sheehy. There's a lot of things that we can do, but we have to ready, aim, fire, not just break it and then cross our fingers and hope that all of our forests don't burn. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to note, I don't have questions this morning about critical minerals, but I'm glad to hear Senator Hoeven and the Secretary engage in that conversation. Mr. Secretary, the invitation remains open to come visit Lithium Valley in Southern California and see the tremendous potential there for lithium and other critical materials as well. Feels like it's been years since you were here for your confirmation hearing and your vote in our previous conversation. So I hope you're enjoying the job. It's everything you were looking forward to and then some. But look, we're knee-deep on a number of issues and concerns, so I'll get right into it. As I'm sure you're aware, the Department of Justice just yesterday published an opinion that asserts that the presidents have the authority to abolish national monuments. I know the chairman made reference to that in his remarks earlier today. I believe this is an extremely dangerous opinion that flies in the face of 90 years of precedent. And you and I discussed this when you were coming through for confirmation, because we worked very hard in recent years on establishing and expanding monuments in California in a very thoughtful and balanced way. So this is personal for me. Given the recent opinion, I do need to ask you for the record, what are your intentions towards recently designated national monuments in California, which, as I've shared with you, enjoy strong bipartisan support, not just at the federal level, but from local and tribal leaders as well?
Thank you, Senator, and I do want to tell you, I would love to accept your invitation to come out and visit. And of course, California does have some of the top critical mineral resources in the country and can play a really important role in our national security. So look forward to talking to you about that. On the monuments, we have a responsibility and direction to take a look at the recently created ones. I think this is something that we all know. If you just, again, we do have the data on that. Most of these monuments have been created in the last weeks and months of presidential terms, and always under the idea that they were everyone was consulted. I have had people in my office, not for the ones in California, but I've had people in my office saying, hey, we weren't consulted. So again, as we listen to the feedback from tribes and citizens and others around the country, we have a responsibility to get on the ground and do some ground truth. And I think the question is not whether their monuments serve a purpose. I think the real question is the size that generally comes up, because there are people in communities, when we create restrictions on land use, that does restrict some of their economic opportunity, and we want to listen to those as well. But again, we're looking for a balanced approach, and happy to continue that dialogue with you.
Well, I appreciate that, but just again, for the record, recognizing states in the West tend to be larger than states in the East. So the appropriateness and size of monuments and other areas of designation tend to be larger because of the acres that we're talking about. You mentioned engagement and consultation in the creation of monuments. That absolutely happened, as you know, in California, so I appreciate you recognizing the distinction. If it's going to be revisited or undone, we expect that same level of engagement on the back end before any action is taken or before any decisions are made. I know my time is limited. Let me move to another topic. As you and I have talked in the past, water, so important to California, to everybody, but especially California. The Department of Reclamation, according to reports, has lost 1,400 public servants, approximately 25% of the agency's entire workforce. In the Bureau of Reclamation's regional office in Sacramento, there used to be 50 staff handling financial issues alone, and now there's only 12. This is the staff that works to approve contracts, grants, agreements, et cetera. Yet the Bureau of Reclamation's California office has cut its staff responsible for these aspects of water infrastructure by nearly 80%. Will you commit to look at the number of finance staff at Reclamation's California regional office to ensure that there's sufficient capacity there to meet the administrative needs of our critical water infrastructure and investments?
Yes, happy to for sure take a look at that. I'm a little surprised at the 80%, because the only reductions would have been so far through people taking one of the early retirement options, unless in that data, and my team can follow up, because we did take some people that are in finance, HR, and IT and roll them up to the Secretary's office, because we felt there was an opportunity for unification at a broader level, state, versus say regional. So I want to make sure that some of those people, I'm just wondering if they're still there, they're just being accounted in another area.
Yeah. Well, if they're accounted, but also where is their work, where are their roles and responsibilities, and have they changed to still be California specific or more broad for the department? I know my time is up. Let me just put a pin in both on the reclamation side, how critical it is not just for within California infrastructure, but also, as we've discussed multiple times, the role reclamation plays for all the Colorado River states, both the lower basin and the upper basin. So we're going to be calling each other more frequently yet again after this hearing. And lastly, we'll submit for the record questions about the cuts to the U.S. Geological Survey. They play a critical role in developing Shake Alert, the nation's only public earthquake early alert system that more than 50 million Americans depend on. Technology has come a long way. It can be very helpful to save lives and minimize damage in the event of inevitable earthquakes. And so I want to revisit some of the budget cuts to that program as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Maybe you'll tell us that someday. I assume it involved just biting on a leather strap until moments before you walked on the debate stand, but we can save that for another day. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I associate myself with the comments about sportsmen. Just several weeks ago, I accepted the chairmanship of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, which I'm greatly honored to do and look forward to working with you on those issues. I have visited your wonderful state, camped there, visited Minot with Senator Kramer, and I must say Minot is the flattest place I've ever been in my life. One of the locals said the good thing about it is if your dog runs away, you can still see him after 3 days. And I also want to compliment you. A lot of people talk about an all-of-the-above energy strategy. You did it. You implemented it in North Dakota. Over 30%, 36% of your electricity comes from wind. And I hope one of the projects you might undertake when and if you are confirmed is to convince your boss that wind power isn't all bad. He is well known for his opposition to wind power, but you know that the benefits are there. Of course, base load is also important. Storage is important to balance the grid. I understand that. But coming from a state where 36% of your electricity came from wind, I hope you can talk to the president about the fact that wind has its virtues and can contribute significantly, because we are, as you note, facing a huge energy challenge over the next 15 to 20 years to support the knowledge economy. Will you undertake that project?
Senator King, certainly you've got great wind resources in Maine. We've got good wind resources in North Dakota. Not every state is lucky to have that. The resources that we do, where the wind is blowing, maybe that flat ground helps us on that. Very few trees to stop the wind. But I would say the key here, you mentioned, is base load versus the intermittent, because we've got to have the right balance, and we maybe have tipped a little too far in one direction. So I think that's the key piece for us, the key short-term emergency.
But you do see the value of wind power. A third of your state's electricity comes from that source.
Yeah, and most of that we export, and so I think our neighbors are happy to have that. But I would also say that, again, it is we need an all-of-the-above strategy. It's what we've had in North Dakota.
And a balanced
It's
grid.
a balance, but we need more. We need more, and the thing we're short of most right now is base load.
Well, Maine has an asset similar to yours offshore. And the Department of the Interior executed several leases recently. I hope I can have your commitment to continue with those leases. They will produce enough energy for all the homes in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. It's an enormous resource in the Gulf of Maine that can provide significant energy. As you may know, the capacity factor of offshore wind is significantly higher than terrestrial wind. So I hope that your department will continue with the projects that are already underway. Will you commit to that?
I'm not familiar with every project that the Interior has underway, but I'll certainly be taking a look at all of those, and if they make sense and they're already in law, then they'll continue. I think the key is, and I think President Trump's been very clear in his statements that he's concerned about the significant amount of tax incentives that have gone towards some forms of energy that have helped exacerbate this imbalance that we're seeing right now today.
You talked briefly to some of the other questions about permitting reform, and I was involved in the discussions with Senator Barrasso, Senator Manchin, and others about the permitting bill that unfortunately we couldn't get across the goal line at the end of the last Congress. I presume that permitting reform not only is for generation projects, but transmission. Do you appreciate the difficulty of permitting transmission assets, particularly in the West?
Well, yes, and I think that this is one of the challenges of our time, and it's one of the challenges that we need to undertake, because whether it's a transmission line, a pipeline, whatever it happens to be, trying to get built, it just takes too long in our country. And if we don't have If we don't have it's one thing to be able to generate that electricity, but if we don't have the ability to transmit it to the places where it's needed, that's going to be a problem.
Exactly. Senator Daines has already mentioned the American the Beautiful Act that he and I have introduced. It's a refresh of the Great American Outdoors Act, one of the most successful initiatives of the Trump administration. I remember working with Secretary Zinke on that project. So I'm gratified to hear your support for that proposal. Final point is we talked about, and that talks about the backlog of maintenance in the national parks and public lands. One of the problems is the department has chronically underfunded maintenance on an ongoing basis. In other words, we're being asked to fix a backlog that frankly should not have existed. And I hope that you'll work with the National Park Service and the Office of Management and Budget to be sure that a sufficient fund is allocated to ongoing maintenance so we don't continue to dig the hole deeper.
Well, I agree with you on that, and this is one of the things when I came in as a business guy into government, I was shocked to find out that we, in North Dakota, didn't have appropriate formulas for funding deferred maintenance. I mean, everybody was happy to approve appropriations to build new buildings, but it was tough to get a dime to take care of the ones we already have. And I think that this is something we're going to take a look at procedurally within Interior. I know that we've got over 2,400 locations, I'm told, in terms of where we've got people stationed.
Right.
We've just got to make sure that not just the national parks, but across the whole department. But we've got to get the formulas right because we're creating liabilities for future generations if we're not taking care of that deferred maintenance.
I can tell you that the formula right now is not right, so I encourage you to take that step. Thank you very much, Governor, for joining us, and we'll look forward to hearing from you further in this hearing. Thank you.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. As part of my responsibilities to ensure the fitness of nominees before any of the committees on which I sit, I asked the following two initial questions. First is, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
We received your testimony late yesterday, and you noted that, and quote, President Trump's energy dominance vision will end wars abroad, end quote. And President Trump has directed you to expand oil and gas drilling on a massive scale, which will lead to increased burning of fossil fuels. Now, the scientific consensus is that burning fossil fuels is a primary human cause of climate change. In 2017, then Secretary of Defense James Mattis, appointed by then President Trump, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, quote, climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating, end quote. In 2014, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel said that climate change is a critical national security threat and a threat multiplier. Now, these are two secretaries of defense. They know something about war. Were you aware that they testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on a number of times that burning more fossil fuel is actually going to not result in the end of wars, but could very well exacerbate and cause wars? Were you aware of this testimony?
Senator, no, I'm not aware of that specific testimony, but I do know that that within fossil fuels, the concern has been about emissions, and within emissions, we have the technology to do things like carbon capture to eliminate harmful emissions.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you have military leaders who acknowledge that climate change is a major issue. And for you to take the position that you're going to engage in active actions that will result in the burning of more fossil fuel, it's troubling. As Secretary of the Interior, it is your duty to see that the department carries out its mission to protect and manage our national our nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. If you are ordered by the president to act in a manner that is counter to the department's mission or to the Constitution, such as drilling in Bear Ears National Monument, will you do as the president asks? Because he wants to drill in that monument.
Well, Senator, of course, as part of my sworn duty, I'll follow the law and follow the Constitution, and so you can count on that. And I have not heard of any
Well,
anything about President Trump wanting to do anything
well, he
other
certainly wants
than
to.
advancing energy production for the benefit of the American people.
We
in a
all know
legal
that
way.
the president wants to drill, baby, drill. And in your testimony, you say that he has a energy dominance vision. So I would ask you that, should you be confirmed that you will have these kinds of matters that you'll have to decide, are you going to drill in a monument? Are you going to protect our natural resources? Or are you going to drill, baby, drill? So I raise that as a concern with you going forward. Compacts of free association. Last year, Congress renewed our compacts of free association, and that comes within the purview of Interior. It involves Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. I would like to get your commitment to implement the new compacts of free association in accordance with the bipartisan law that was enacted last year.
Well, Senator, these Pacific Islands, in addition to the three that you mentioned that are part of the compact, but also the others that are under the insular areas of Interior, are all critically important to national security for the United States of America. All of them have important military implications. All of these are places where U.S. Sailors fought and died during World War II. And with the aggression that China is showing in the Pacific, it's more important that we support them more than ever. I know that Hawaii plays an important role, including in things like with medical care for those residents of those islands, and I think it's important that the federal government does its share as opposed to putting the load on the state.
Thank you. It sounds as though you have familiarity with the compacts, for which I am gratified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Burgum, congratulations on your nomination, and I hope to run through a couple of questions here, so help me out in your brevity if possible. I know the ranking member anyway, and maybe even the chairman brought up our beautiful outdoor economy, which we've heard from your senator that apparently you're a big outdoorsman yourself. But not only have you become steward of over 20% of the land in the United States, but some of the most beautiful, iconic places in America, and these are an economic juggernaut. They are in my state, if you think about Mount Rainier or Olympic National Park or the Hanford Reach or many other places. The outdoor rec economy generates $1.2 trillion in economic output every year, $1.2 trillion, and accounts for 5 million jobs. And I believe continues to grow at an incredible clip that when you think about economic development in some of our more rural communities, it doesn't take a lot to add a little bit of infrastructure, and then next thing you know, you're off to the races as to making a tourism and an economic impact to these economies. I think in North Dakota, it was your third largest industry, generating $1 billion and 14,000 jobs, and you actually created an office of outdoor recreation. Good for you. Good for you. So I think you get it. But now when we talk about this oil, first I want to make sure on the public lands, will you support more input in outdoor recreation economies and gateway communities? And will you fully utilize the LWCF and support the conservation legacies bills that we've passed?
Well, of course, First of all, in your comments on outdoor recreation, I agree completely on the importance of this. And it's not only good for the economy, it's also good for the health of Americans. I mean, I think one thing that we understand is that we just need more people to get off their devices, get outdoors, get engaged, understand the importance of our land, our wildlife, our soil health, all that aspects of it. And again, we are facing a mental health and addiction crisis in our country. And part of the answer is, for many people, is that getting that connection back to the outdoors. So support that completely, and would look forward to working with you on your other issues as well.
Great. So you support the LWCF that we've passed in continuing to support those funds?
Some of those acronyms I'm less familiar with, so I'd look forward to learning more about them. But
Okay. Well, we'll get you a question for the record, because
Okay.
it's vitally important, we believe. We think we broke through finally. And the reason why I'm asking this is because the lead up to the next question.
Okay.
You're for this very aggressive oil and lease strategy, I think, or maybe you're going to take this helm over, with a group of people and say we need to do more on the oil and gas. Part of our efforts have been to show that these federal lands are very important in an outdoor economy. And so how many areas that we've already leased for oil and gas that aren't being used, why don't we start there? Why don't we just start with those, the leases that are already there? Why don't we start with that?
Well, I think I would use the term that I was for aggressive. I've never stated that. I'm for following the law. In the current administration in North Dakota, for the first time since Harry Truman, the quarterly lease sales were not held as required by law. It didn't happen for 2 years. We ended up having to sue the federal government just to follow the law. So I think the starting place is for us to go back to follow the law on these. And then again, we always want to prioritize those areas that have the most resource opportunity for America with the least impact on lands that are important. And I think that's pretty simple formula to be able to figure that out, given the scale of the amount of public lands we have. We can do a lot more without touching or even being visible to any of the people that are concerned about land use.
So you would prioritize the existing leases?
I'm not sure if I understand the...
Juxtaposed to, this conversation, which we've had many times in this committee, let's expand more leases that, that we don't have right now. I'm sure the chairman we could get into a very long discussion here about Bears Ears, particularly I wasn't for expanding oil and gas leasing into Bears Ears. It's a beautiful protected area. I personally think that the outdoor economy is a juggernaut. I don't want offshore drilling off the coast of Washington. Why? I got a marine sanctuary. Why in God's name? I have a Cascadia fault line. I mean, I could have devastation to an economy that's paying dividends. Why would I want to do that? So I'm just saying, one of the things that would be helpful to hear from you is that you believe in prioritizing on federal land the leases that are already there, as opposed to now going and saying, okay, let's get a big map and open up all federal land to new leasing. Because your point about efficiency, yeah, the most efficient thing is go after what you already have.
Well, I'm going to have to, before I can make an affirmative statement that I agree with you, I'd have to understand, because what I've seen in my time as governor is not that we have existing, but we're actually restricting legal access for development or timber or oil and gas or whatever on public lands today.
Okay.
By illegally not holding the leases that should have been held. So I'm not even,
Okay, we'll come, my time is up, and I'm now in the red, so I'm going to get cut off here. So, but we will submit something for you and submit something for the record on that. I'm sure I'll submit something on fire and CLT, and maybe you and I can have a discussion about what I think really would help us move forward on some of those issues. But I also, just for the record, on tribal sovereignty, you believe in tribal sovereignty, you believe in tribal consultation, which doesn't mean you just pick up the phone and have one conversation. Tribal consultation means you actually, when the federal government says, hey, so much money needs to go to tribes, that you actually figure out the plan for that to happen.
Well, tribal consultation to me as governor of North Dakota has meant actually spending time and going to the tribes, listening, sometimes listening for hours to really understand what the issues are, and then in getting to people ahead of time, and then working on things that are important. We achieved MOUs on law enforcement. I mean, some of the scarcest and most devastating law enforcement in this country right now is the lack of BIA agents on federal land. I mean, some of the tribal reservations have become harbors for criminal organizations because they know that we don't have enough resource there, and then our local county sheriffs, the state police, in many cases didn't have jurisdiction. That's just one. Healthcare is another. I mean,
Yep, thank you. I'm sorry, the chairman's going to cut me off. But thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate it. That is the kind of stewardship we need with our partnership between us and Indian country. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Senator Murkowski now.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. Do you believe that your agency has sufficient personnel to fight what will be a very difficult wildfire season this year?
We do. We're at about exactly the same head count on wildland firefighters as last year.
Let me ask you about that number. So how many wildland firefighting personnel are currently employed by the Interior Department?
Between DOI and...
I'm talking about the Interior Department. I understand with respect to the Agriculture Department and the Forest Service. I'm asking about the Interior Department specifically.
You can ask specifically, but Brooke Rollins and I are committed to working together on this to make
No.
sure we optimize.
Mr. Secretary, here, hold on. This is not a gotcha question. Hold on. I went online this morning, the Department of Interior's website. It says 5,780 total number of federal wildland fire personnel employed by the Interior Department in 2024, right? Your predecessor published that number online so the American people could understand how many people in your agency. This isn't a gotcha. I'm just trying to figure out how many people are, what is that number for 2025? It's June of 2025.
It's essentially the same as last year because we're flat across both agencies at about 17,000
Will you
firefighters.
commit to providing the public and us with the number, with updating the website so that we understand how many fire personnel are employed by the Interior Department?
We'll be completely transparent on all that. I'm trying to give you an answer to that question. But,
I hear you. You're representing that it's close or essential or similar. I guess I'm just trying to get some representations that we have not lost fire personnel since last year because, as you probably know, I'm sure you're aware, the Forest Service has lost many red card holders, so much so that the chief of the Forest Service put out a video earlier this week imploring those whom had been terminated from the agency to come back. Do you know how many red card holders have left the Interior Department in the last 6 months?
I do not.
You don't know how many red card holders have left your agency?
Well, if they would have left, they would have left through early retirement. We've got 13,000 that
Wouldn't
we're
that
hiring.
be something that's important to know? How many red card holders have left your agency so that we'd be ready for the fire season? I mean, again, I guess that would be another piece of data that I think would be important for this committee to consider. But I'll move on.
And you're aware that we have 13,000 flex.
I hear you. I'm well aware of that, and I'm also concerned that your agency is apparently not keeping track of the red card holders that have been purged from your agency. But in any event, let's talk about the National Park Service.
Can I just say there's been no purging?
Sir,
Why do people keep saying purging? Because
Mr. Secretary,
law
I'm going to ask
enforcement-
you a question about the National Park Service. Give me an opportunity to ask you a question.
Can I say?
Do you believe the National Park Service?
You said something that's not true.
Mr. Chairman,
you said it wasn't
I'm
a
gonna reclaim my
gotcha.
time and ask you to stop the clock so I can ask the Secretary some questions. So let's talk about the National Park Service. How many positions of superintendent are vacant within the National Park Service?
A number of superintendents are vacant because of the.
I'm not asking you why. I'm just asking you how many. These aren't gotcha questions. How many are vacant? Is it 1? Is it 10? We've heard that it's 100. Is 100 accurate?
We have a number of superintendents.
You won't say what the number is?
I'll be happy to get you this. We're filling positions when a
Mr. Secretary, I mean, honestly, these aren't gotcha questions. If I ask a simple question.
Of course these are gotcha questions.
It's a gotcha question to ask
you won't even
how
let me
many
answer the
superintendent
question.
positions are vacant. I'll ask you why, but I first want to know the premise, which is how many are vacant. You and I both know that there are roughly 100 superintendent positions that are vacant across the country. Now, you have said that the $1 billion cut that you've proposed to the National Park Service represents cuts to overhead, right? Redundancies. I've heard you say that publicly previously, right? I'm not mischaracterizing that, I don't think. It's red tape, right? That's the kind of stuff that you're trying to cut from the National Park Service? Is that incorrect?
We're trying to cut jobs that aren't in parks. And if there's a vacancy at a superintendent, we fill it with the deputy. So it's incorrect for you to say that we have vacancies, because when a superintendent takes early retirement, superintendents are at the end of their career.
We call that, when there's not a superintendent at one of our national parks, when the position is vacant, I think most American people would describe that as vacant. But in any event, what I will just say to you is that while you are cutting the National Park Service by $1 billion, or at least proposing a cut of $1 billion, cutting seasonal and temporary employees, 39% down within the National Park Service, I find it very interesting that your agency is issuing red tape edicts to national parks to put up signage for rewriting of American history at these national parks. It strikes me that perhaps the agency should be more focused on supporting our national parks, on fighting wildfires, on managing these important national jewels of the system, rather than spending its time on red tape requirements. But I see I am out of time. I appreciate the chairman's indulgence. I'll yield back.
Time has expired.
As Secretary of the Interior, it is your duty to see that the department carries out its mission to protect and manage our nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. If you are ordered by the president to act in a manner that is counter to the department's mission or to the Constitution, such as drilling in Bear Ears National Monument, will you do as the president asks? Because he wants to drill in that monument.
Well, Senator, of course, as part of my sworn duty, I'll follow the law and follow the Constitution, and so you can count on that. And I have not heard of anything about President Trump wanting to do anything
Well, he
other
certainly wants to.
than advancing energy production for the benefit of the American people.
We all know
legal
that
way.
the president wants to drill, baby, drill. And in your testimony, you say that he has a energy dominance vision. So I would ask you that, should you be confirmed, that you will have these kinds of matters that you'll have to decide. Are you going to drill in a monument? Are you going to protect our natural resources? Or are you going to drill, baby, drill? So I raise that as a concern with you going forward. Compacts of free association. Last year, Congress renewed our compacts of free association, and that comes within the purview of Interior. It involves Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. I would like to get your commitment to implement the new compacts of free association in accordance with the bipartisan law that was enacted last year.
Well, Senator, these Pacific Islands, in addition to the three that you mentioned that are part of the compact, but also the others that are under the insular areas of Interior, are all critically important to national security for the United States of America. All of them have important military implications. All of these are places where U.S. sailors fought and died during World War II. And with the aggression that China is showing in the Pacific, it's more important that we support them more than ever. I know that Hawaii plays an important role, including in things like with medical care for those residents of those islands, and I think it's important that the federal government does its share as opposed to putting the load on the state.
Thank you. It sounds as though you have familiarity with the compacts, for which I am gratified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to associate myself with your comments, Mr. Chairman, on determining the asset value of what we own. It's astounding that that doesn't exist. And one of the things that would contribute to, as we discussed previously, is adequate maintenance budgets. If you know the asset value, there are sort of standard industry percentages that should be applied in order to determine a maintenance budget. So I believe that's an important step. I presume you believe climate change is a problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that climate change is a global phenomenon for sure.
I noted the biographical material that in 2021 as governor, you set a goal for North Dakota of carbon neutrality by 2030. to be achieved in a variety of ways. And as you mentioned, you've really worked hard on the carbon neutrality of fossil fuel extraction and fossil fuel use. I'm a little worried today, though. You keep distinguishing between intermittent and baseload. Would you agree that renewable resources, solar and wind, for example, can be developed if they are adequately, if they can be integrated into the grid in a safe and reliable way?
Yes, they can, and it's not for me personally for any political reasons that I distinguish. It's just because of physics, the physics of the grid. If we don't have enough base load, and it's the base load that we have that's allowed our nation to make the investments into the intermittent.
I don't want the word, in a former life, I developed both base load and intermittent resources. I don't want the word base load to be code for no renewables. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, we need a balance, but they cannot, the intermittent, if you want to call them renewables, is used as a positive word, but this is a fact of life, is they're intermittent. And when they're intermittent, until we have storage solutions, and we're years away from having significant enough cost-effective storage to support that, we need to have the base load, or the intermittent doesn't even have a life.
But it can be integrated. In your case in North Dakota, 35% of your electricity comes from wind power. I presume your grid works.
Well, it's super stressed as it is around the country. We're in parts of two grids. We're part of MISO going east, and we're part of SPP going west. And you can have days when the rated capacity is 30, but you got a day when the wind's blowing. The wind's blowing so hard it drives all the base load off of production. And then the next day it's 20 below and there's no wind blowing, and we got no wind, and then you got to like crank up the base load again. And so
that's one of the most important reasons that we've talked about innovation. We need to work on storage. You would agree, I think, that renewables or intermittents, whatever you want to call them, plus storage equals baseload.
Yes, but right now at a much higher cost. And so then, of course, we want to have not only have it be reliable, we also want to have it be affordable. And so that's part of what we have to look at as a nation: is what cost are we willing to take on to try to achieve those goals. And I believe in if it's all of the above, if we can decarbonize traditional fuels cheaper than we can subsidize some of the renewables, then that should be looked at fairly and equitably and economically, because that's a better path forward for every citizen if we can do it more affordably.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but we've talked a lot about innovation, and I'm a great believer in American innovation. And the cost, for example, of solar panels has gone from, I don't know, $70 a kilowatt down to 70 cents. I mean, battery storage, for example, in Maine, there is a project underway for an 85 megawatt, 100-hour grid scale storage at a reasonable cost, because it's not based on lithium ion, or it's based on iron. And so if we're moving into a period where innovation, I believe, will bring storage down. And of course, as you know, wind and solar are the cheapest forms of energy today on a levelized basis, understanding that storage and backup is part of that calculation. But I hope that you'll work with the Department of Energy. Mr. Wright was here yesterday, and one of his business interests was in geothermal and batteries. So I just, when I hear base load used sometimes in these contexts, it sounds like no more renewables. I don't think that's a sustainable path for this country, and it's certainly not a way of meeting the challenge of climate change, which you've acknowledged is a serious one.
No, we need all forms of electricity, and we need more of it in the very near term. And so this is not about one versus the other. This is about how do we drive forward and increase the amount of electricity we have in the country. So I'm a both. All of the above in terms of our approach on how we do it, but we got to do it in a way that's we have affordability and reliability. On the storage side, there is a future, but having been in tech for 30 years, batteries get better at about 2% a year. And that's what it's been for 30 or 40 years. And there's no breakthrough that's coming. Yes, it's improving, but it's not like the microchip, which doubles in power.
It may not be Moore's Law, but I think the amount of resources that are going into this research at the Department of Energy and in other places, and the development of this iron-based grid-scale storage, there are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, good to see you again. Appreciate the time in my office a few weeks back, and greetings to your wife, Catherine. We can't do the jobs that we do without the support and love of our spouses. My time is limited. I'm not sure if we have a second round. There's a number of issues that I'm going to try to get to. If I don't, I'll be submitting questions for the records. Issues like tribal sovereignty that's come up before, and your thoughts on our trust and treaty obligations as a country. Public lands, we've had some recent progress and exciting announcements in California that we'd like to continue to build on and not go backwards on. Try to get to some water system. But let me begin with some of the more urgent questions and issues. In California, Los Angeles specifically, we've all seen the devastation of recent fires in Southern California. As we speak here today, more than 40,000 acres burned, 12,000 structures plus destroyed, more than 24 people who have perished. That number is probably going to grow. It's clear it's been one of the most destructive natural disasters in Los Angeles history. As governor, you had an experience, not at this scale, but in 2024, you requested a major disaster declaration to assist in the recovery from the historic wildfires that ravaged across northwest North Dakota. And President Biden, as I understand, approved it quickly and without conditions. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you believe federal disaster aid should come with or without conditions?
Well, I think it's each situation would vary. But first of all, let me just say that I want to extend, on behalf of Catherine and I, our empathy and sympathy to anybody that's lost their home, lost their lives, lost a loved one. We've got friends that have lived in the area that have lost their homes, homes they raised their kids in for 30 years, every piece of memorabilia and memory that they had gone, only getting out with a shirt on their back and talking to those individuals directly. And as it happens, our daughter was in L.A. For an event. The event was canceled. Catherine had flown out there, so both of them also had to evacuate as the fires were encroaching in that part of the city. So our family, part of our family saw it firsthand. And again, it's just urban wildfire is something that we, as a country, we need to think. And I say each situation is different because where you talked about in North Dakota was largely rural, largely grasslands.
And I'll get to that because we've experienced both. But please extend my offer to support, assist in any way any of my constituents that are friends or relatives of your family. For the record, there's never been strings attached to disaster relief. And I certainly hope this is not the first case. So I would ask, as this plays out in Congress over the next several months, if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed as Interior Secretary, you wouldn't be the one deciding on whether or not to grant disaster declarations, but the department is significant, particularly when it comes to wildfire response. Would you commit to responding to every disaster with as much support and resources possible, regardless of which state or jurisdiction the disaster is in?
Well, absolutely, but I would say I would go a step further, which is we've got to commit to, and maybe it's going to take, apparently the fire in Maui wasn't big enough, in a sense. I mean, that was horrible, 100-plus lives lost, the devastation that's there, but it didn't create a response nationally or at the federal level or a collaboration of states. But with this incredible, the largest ever, and when the dollars come up, this could be the most expensive urban wildfire in the history of the country. It's probably a time for all of us together to say, what could we be doing differently? And I'm excited that Tim Sheehy is a new senator. He's the first that I know of who's actually worked as a professional firefighter on wildfire. I know that he and others are willing to work across the aisle to come up with solutions
And
because
Senator
it's-
Sheehan and I are already working on some proposals on a bipartisan basis to improve the federal government's ability to help in situations like these.
And if I could, Senator, I would say we also have to look, it goes back to actually the grid, because if you, a wildfire, whether it's in North Dakota or California, you need three things. You need oxygen, you need fuel load, and you need a spark. And in both cases, in North Dakota and in whatever, when you have high winds, those sparks can come from above ground power lines coming in contact with vegetation. And so we have to think about the grid
I
and
love
bearing
that you
power
have that
lines.
appreciation and knowledge, and unfortunately the experience, because the red flag conditions is something new to people across the country, but nothing new for those of us in the very dry West. My time is running quickly. I want to get at least one other issue in on the record.
Thank you very much, Chairman Murkowski. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to start by touching briefly on Hurricane Ridge. That is a place, as you know, is very special to people in my home state of Washington, and visitors come to it from all over the world. I know that you visited Olympic National Park last week, and you saw how scenic it was, and a hint of how brutal the weather can be. It's called Hurricane Ridge for a reason. The Hurricane Ridge Day Lodge burned down in a tragic fire 2 years ago, and Congress delivered the emergency funding necessary to rebuild it last year. In the execution report that you delivered to the committee in February, the disaster funding spend plan, you included the money for the Olympic National Park, I understand is for Hurricane Ridge. Do you have any updates for us on the next steps for that project?
No, but I did have an opportunity with the park superintendent and some of the lead people to actually get to Hurricane Ridge, and thankfully there was not 70-mile-an-hour winds. It was beautiful, sunny, calm, gorgeous, but I got to see the site where the fire had happened and was able to meet with them regarding the plans that they have, and it looks like a great project.
Good. And can you just keep my staff and me updated on that project as it moves forward? It's really important to all of us.
Okay, thank you.
As you saw, Washington State is home to a number of pristine public lands. People travel from all over the world to experience my state and Oregon. Secretary Burgum, our public lands aren't for sale. Protecting our wilderness, living up to our tribal obligations, keeping our communities safe, it's just not negotiable. And it's actually a core reason that your department does exist and have been these have been places with strong bipartisan support. So I'm really concerned that one of the first things you did was make deep, painful cuts at our parks and start talking about our public lands kind of like they're a piggy bank. I do not want to tell future generations that, see that river of sludge used to be clear, used to have salmon, or see that charred mountainside used to be a forest with campgrounds and trails, or that smokestack used to be a national park. I worry because it feels to me like your vision could lead to that with your budget cuts and mass firings and reorganization. And I'm deeply concerned about the proposed cuts to programs and funding that our tribes rely on, the mass firing of park rangers. They're the people who help our visitors. They clear the trails, they clean the bathrooms, they respond to emergencies, and it just, as I watch this and hear from folks and see what's happening, on top of getting some bedrock environmental protections, I just don't see how your department can execute the law without staff in place. So just let me ask you, in your short tenure, you have overseen significant staffing reductions, over 10%, and reorganization efforts across the Department of Interior, with, I understand, more firings to come. The National Park Service has lost 18% of its staff. You managed to actually fire the only plumber at Mount Rainier National Park. There's just nothing efficient about that kind of management. You've also decided that what few staff remain at our national parks will focus solely on visitor services. That really abandons the conservation mission, which no doubt will lead to the degradation of our natural resources and our parks. Actually, on May 8th, 5 former NPS directors, Republican and Democratic administration alike, raised really grave concerns about these decisions. And they wrote that the National Park Service's founding statute requires conservation at our parks, so they will, quote, be unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. You know, we need trail guides and biologists. We need EMTs and geologists. We need snowplow drivers, and we need historians. Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that you do have a statutory obligation to conserve our national parks? And that's really a simple yes or no.
Yes.
Well, it just feels to me watching this that you are abandoning that obligation with the staffing cuts, and your job is to carry out the laws that Congress has passed, not as you wish were written. So let me ask you, how many people do you plan to fire from the National Park Service?
Let me respond by saying, I'm going to repeat myself, that there's an opportunity to have more people working in our parks, in all the positions that you've described, Senator, and have less people working for the National Park Service. We just have to accept that this math, that if you've got a situation where slightly less than 50% of the people actually work in the park, that everything you said, I can increase the number of people in the park, but still decrease the number of people on payroll at the National Park Service because we're eliminating overhead, back office, IT, and HR roles. And so I can agree with everything that you're saying, but then to have a mischaracterization that if we cut anybody, that somehow I'm cutting into the conservation mission.
It's huge cuts, and the people you're talking about are actually the support staff. And when you cut support staff, that's not efficient. You know, how does someone drive a snowplow if you don't have a staffer that makes sure that the government gets the best deal to buy that snowplow? I mean, there's many, many detailed people that you're talking about that actually make sure that the spending is efficient, that the people are efficient, that we all know how important staff is. I mean, you can't survive without that. Those are the people that you're letting go. We can't be efficient if they are not there.
Well, are you suggesting that the National Park Service today is operating at peak efficiency and that there isn't any changes that I could make?
I would suggest that I welcome any suggestions to us about how to be efficient, but just mass across the board cuts and firing is really going to not increase efficiency at our parks, and that I think we all should be very concerned about.
But if the goal is for us to have more people working in the parks, you're comfortable if I can get to a spot where we have more people working in the parks?
You show me what employees you are leaving behind that don't support someone that makes sure that they have the equipment that they need, that is up to date, it's running, those kinds of things. You can't just cut those people and expect people to be out in the national parks without somebody who's making sure that their equipment is safe, that their hours are maintained, all the things that it takes to run a place. Our national parks are huge. They take a lot of people to run.
A state is huge. I've run in DOT. I understand the role of support personnel across Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Rec, DOT. All of these aspects of a national park are part of running a state. And I'm confident that with our team that we can achieve your objectives and still have a reduction.
One thing I am really concerned about, and everybody should be, is our national wildland firefighting efforts. And countless staff who provide the necessary support there. For example, firefighters put their lives at risk. Without support they need in many different roles, it just gets more dangerous. So those are the kinds of people that I am extremely concerned about, that without thought or really smart moves, that we're going to be putting our parks at risk.
Well, agree on the wildland firefighters. That's why Secretary Rollins and I yesterday held a joint event reaffirming our commitment to work together between the Forest Service and Interior, and our commitment to have full staffing for wildland firefighters this summer. And we're close to approaching that goal. And so we're fully committed and
Okay, I appreciate it. Just one really quick question regarding our tribes. You have a role in fulfilling the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to our tribes. I see numerous cuts across the budget that defunds tribal police, putting together the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I just wanted to ask you, how many tribes have you personally consulted with on your budget request?
I've been meeting with tribes every week since I've been here. I've got a deep understanding of our challenges and shortage in law enforcement.
There's 574 tribes. Which ones have you met with? Have you consulted or met with?
I can happy to provide you a list, but I just recently had the Interior Secretary Tribal Advisory Committee. We had 24 representatives from tribes from across the country actually meeting in my office just a couple of weeks ago. Law enforcement was a key part of that. We had an opportunity to meet with the family of Emily Pike. I brought Kash Patel over. Of course, it's not just the BIA, it's also the FBI. When these cases get escalated, we have over
Well,
6,000.
I would just remind all of us that Kash Patel is cutting $500 million from his budget on this, so.
And he's providing 60 people to Indian country right now to help with the 6,000 unsolved cases on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a priority for us.
All of us. And I just want to say that my tribes in Washington State are deeply concerned. They're telling us that these layoffs will eliminate natural resource management, basic social services, and they are horrified. So I hope that in your list that you will provide me that I see some of their names.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. We'll turn to Senator Rounds. And Mr. Secretary, just so you know, our votes have started, so you're going to.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, which I consider a higher title than secretary or senator, just so you know. I'm disappointed.
As a former governor.
That's right. Oh, yes, that's true. I'm disappointed, Mr. Secretary, with the budget, particularly for the National Park Service. First is what materials we've been given. This is the budget justification for the National Park Service for the 2025 budget that's submitted to Congress so that we have something we can work from and work with. That's 2025. This is what we've been given this year for 2026. That's an insult to the Congress. That's not adequate to give us the data that we need in order to make the oversight decisions because we don't know the details of what's being done. There's some boilerplate in here about how we're going to make things more efficient. It's hard for me to understand how gutting America's best idea isn't America's worst idea. A 37% cut in the National Park Service budget, which was already underfunded, I don't believe is responsible. The word stewardship has come up in this hearing several times. That ain't stewardship. Here's some data. This is visitation at our national parks going back to 2010. The blue bars are visitation. The orange is staff at the National Park Service. So you can see there was already a growing disparity back in 2010. This is where staffing was. This is where visitation was. Here's where we are as of this budget, right here. That's where we are as of this budget. We were already woefully understaffed, and you're talking about cutting the budget by another third. Now, my real question is why? The $1.2 billion you're cutting from the National Park Service is devastating to the National Park Service. It doesn't amount to anything in terms of our federal budget. I did a calculation. If our federal budget was the height of this room, what you're cutting from the National Park Service is the combined height of 2 credit cards. In other words, to save virtually no money from the federal budget, we're devastating one of America's treasures. And that's what I don't understand. And you yourself a few minutes ago said we don't have the data, you don't have the visitation data. This is ready, fire, aim. How about waiting a year, developing the data, finding out what it is, because you can't convince me that a detailed analysis of the National Park Service took place in the last couple of months to justify this pitiful submission to this committee. So I'm anxious to hear. We all know the term bang for the buck. This is damage for the buck. This is huge damage to the Park Service for a very minimal return in terms of reduction of the deficit, reduction of our federal budget. Why in the world, given your commitment to the national parks, the new park, the Teddy Roosevelt Park in your state, why did you let them do this?
Well, Senator, I want to just first, appreciate the chart that you're holding up behind there. I believe that number, if I can see it correctly, probably is the full-time staffing as opposed to the summer and seasonal. I think that we actually have it's a mix. I think that line I'm trying to see there.
Well, you
looks like-
allowed more seasonals for this year, but I understand only half of them have been hired, and we're in the summer right now.
Well, more than half have been hired, but I think, again, this is a mix. Again, when I just got back from a trip to Alaska, I was at Kenai Fjords. This is a, beautiful and amazing park. It's, the road gets plowed in May. It snows over in November. This is a classic case where we need a lot of staffing. Cruise ships are stopping in Seward. They get, hundreds of thousands of visitors over a 3-4 month period. And then in the wintertime, the visitor centers aren't even open. So we have to figure out a way to be able to do flex staffing. It's not just as simple as the raw number. And the one number that I was able
raw
to get...
number, there may be details in here, but it's pretty unmistakable, the trend on this chart. And
Well, but the
again,
other thing-
I don't understand. You're saving a very small amount of money. You're gutting I looked it up last night. The National Park Service is the most popular federal agency. The most popular federal agency. Why in the world would you target this agency, particularly when you yourself in your testimony today said, I don't have the data?
Well, we're working...
That's ready, fire, aim. Get the data, understand the details of the budget. Give us something like this, and then we can decide what the plan should be, to echo the vice chair. What's the plan for doing this in a thoughtful way, not an arbitrary way of, all probationary employees and that kind of thing?
Well, in that thick book that you have there, I'm certain that there's one thing that's missing, which is how many of those people actually work in a park? Because we spent 8 weeks this spring rebuilding all the HR data to find out, of all the people you have in your chart, how many work in a park. Because the real issue that citizens want is, do I have an interpretive person? Do I have a ranger? Do I have, are the bathrooms clean? And so part of that is making sure that we have fewer people working, in places like Washington, D.C., more people working in the parks. I believe that we can reduce what we spend in overhead in the park and have more people actually working in the parks. And in a place like Yellowstone this summer, there are more people right now on the ground in Yellowstone than there were 3 years ago.
And I'd like to see that plan before you submit a budget that cuts the budget by 37%. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would just want to say one thing, Mr. Chairman. It's one thing that we're in a sad point in America if we say that cutting $1 billion is meaningless, or it's as thin as a piece of paper. We're all Americans. We are all part of a budget thing. Last year, this country spent $2,000 billion more than we brought in. That's what a $2 trillion deficit is. And it's to think that we can't find savings in every agency, particularly when we've got, decades-old IT systems and way too many people in overhead. I mean, we just have to all agree that we can be more efficient and still deliver great services at places like our national parks. We can do both of those things. It's not an either or. These are false trade-offs. We can have better experiences at the park, better staffing at the parks, and we can have fewer people working for the national park system. My best guess is that barely half of the people of that number actually work in a park. The rest are in some other jobs.
Part of the responsibility of the National Park Service is stewardship and resource management, not necessarily being park rangers. That's part of the responsibility of the Organic Act of the National Parks. And I'd point out that $600 billion of that deficit that you mentioned could be covered by better enforcement at the IRS of a lot of people not paying their taxes. $600 billion, that's the estimate that the deficit could be reduced. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's time to expire. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Kennedy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Burgum, for being with us. I had an opportunity a few weeks ago to share dinner with you, and I, after that dinner, listened to you for about an hour, and I was extremely impressed with your intelligence and capacity to handle the issues of the day. So thank you very much for being here, almost up to 4 hours, and I'm really sorry to take a few more minutes of your day and your life to answer some questions, but these are important questions. In fact, I'll just add to that and just say I have 5 interns with me right now, and I said, Doug Burgum's downstairs right now. You need to come and see Doug Burgum perform, because the man is intelligent and capable, and I'm really grateful that you're serving in the capacity that you are. You have other things that you could be doing, but thank you for your patriotic service to our country. As you know, 70% of Utah's lands are actually controlled by the federal government. That involves a requirement on a regular basis for us to interact with BLM, Interior, and others agencies that make it really hard for us, as I know as a governor you had to deal with this too, for us to develop and have local control over these vital lands. And so understanding that you're sympathetic to that, I'm really grateful that you and the administration are working to enhance our permitting process, that we're trying to move those things along so we can unleash our American energy dominance, which I'm really grateful for. I want to talk for a few moments about the Antiquities Act, which for ages has been abused by various administrations. And I have a quote from the original Antiquities Act that said, quote, "The smallest area compatible with the protection of the objects," unquote, is how it's supposed to be used. Instead, we have vast tracts of land. Bears Ears, for example, is 1.4 million acres. Hovenweep, which is nearby, is only 800 acres to protect vital antiquities associated with that. So I would like to know, when it comes to Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante monuments, what is an update that you can provide as to what the Trump administration is going to do regarding these monuments? Can you give me any kind of update or statement regarding that?
Well, I think you know that the Bears Ears and Escalante have been at the center of this debate about the ability for the presidential pen to both, create, and then can future presidents shrink or modify or not. And that legal battle is going on right now. But I believe in following the law, and your particular quote that you cited from the 1906 Antiquities Act is the one that I view as the basis for this law, which is smallest possible acreage to protect the objects. There's other methodologies that we have, whether it's going through a longer process than just an executive order in the final days of an administration to say this area is going to become protected, it's going to become wilderness area, it's going to become part of federal lands. But the idea that we can just transform and change the land use on millions of acres. And if you look at when these monuments were created, if people don't think it's political, then look at the mass majority of them were created within the last weeks of administrations, starting in the late 1990s, and then that's when this whole trend began of this sort of broad interpretation of it. And then it's for a state like yours, creating a 1.4 million acre monument. Hey, do that in a state that's got 1% federal land. You do that in a state that's already got 69% federal land, you get a different reaction from the public and from the citizens and from the state government. So I think again, all of these decisions are also contextual with where they're at. So we're going to be taking a close look and working with the administration. Happy to work with you and others in these, particularly in the large public land states who are really impinged by these decisions.
Thank you for doing that. The reality is, you say land use, and I know that many talk about land use, but many times these monument designations are land non-use at all. It's a museum piece. It's to forever be looked at, but never touched, never felt, never utilized on any level. And I'll just say the earth is, and I'm a family doctor, and doctoring means a lot to me, is our bodies and the earth are very similar. Our bodies are meant to be used. They're not museum pieces. We should use our bodies responsibly. We should not abuse them. And our land is the same way, is that land does better when it's used and managed, but when it's abused and mismanaged or neglected, in both cases, both entities suffer. Utah is one of the fastest growing states in the country. Another thing that I'm really eager to talk to you about for moments that I have is housing, and the fact that we have federal land and we can't build anything on it, including necessary infrastructure or housing. Senator Mike Lee from the state of Utah has proposed the Houses Act, which contiguous land to localities that want to purchase at fair market value federal land so that they can use it for housing is, I think, a necessary policy that we could promulgate. What are your thoughts about federal land and the possibilities that we could use that to address our housing crisis in the West, which is a massive issue in many states?
I think in highland states, or in the high public land states, particularly Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Alaska, these are places where we have to look really hard at finding a solution. And we talked earlier today that where there was bipartisan legislation like the Southern Nevada Lands Act. Harry Reid drove that thing. It's been working. There's models out there on how to get this thing done.
Thank you very much for your time. You've been great. And Mr. Chair, thank you for the time. I yield back.
Gentleman's time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Mr. Secretary, you familiar with the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge in Georgia?
I'm not familiar, no.
I'd love to get you down to visit. Can you do that?
I would love to get to Georgia.
we would love to welcome you to visit the Okefenokee. It is one of our state's great treasures, one of the most beautiful, biodiverse wildlife refuges in North America, the largest blackwater swamp of its kind in North America. There is an effort with bipartisan support that the previous administration supported to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee. This has strong bipartisan support among local officials, state officials in Georgia, former Governor Sonny Perdue, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones among them. Will you continue to support our efforts to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee, which is now in your purview as part of a National Wildlife Refuge system?
Well, I'm certainly interested in learning more about it. I know that that's a lengthy process and is of achieving that. So I would love to understand all the implications of supporting it, if there's budget implications for Interior. So, but I'm certainly happy to take a look at it.
Well, we need your support. We need to get you down there as well to spend some time at the refuge. I know there's been some public discussion about sale of public lands. Can you give an unequivocal guarantee that you will not pursue any sale of any part of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Secretary, I wrote you a letter on April 10th about an apparent effort by DOGE to close the U.S. Geological Survey office in Norcross, Georgia. This is the Water Science Center in Norcross. Plays a critical role in ensuring water quality for folks in Metro Atlanta. Did you receive that letter?
I'm certain that our team did.
I have not received a response. It's been about 6 weeks. Any reason for that?
No specific reason other than how incredibly short-staffed we are as we're trying to ramp up.
Can you get back more promptly in the future?
As we just said earlier, when we have 0 of our 16 Senate confirmed leaders on board. First one is coming on the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and so as we get leadership team in place, I'm sure our operations will speed up.
We need timely responses to those kinds of inquiries, Mr. Secretary. I mean, the staff at this office test water quality to ensure that Georgians don't drink contaminated water. Senator Warnock and I have asked you not to close this office. No justification for such closure was offered. There's significant public concern in Georgia about the potential impact on water quality. Am I correct that you've abandoned those plans or overruled the DOGE effort to close that office in Norcross?
I'm not familiar with the, when you're saying closure, I know that there was an effort to take a look at all the real estate we had, particularly the fact that we had virtually every employee in Interior was working remotely, and yet we were paying hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate bills. And so I think it was reasonable that we took a look to say, do we need the real estate? But I'm not sure when you're saying closing the office, if you're talking about the positions or about the office lease, because I know some office leases were being considered removed and some have been.
Yeah, so DOGE expressed its intent to close the U.S. Geological Survey Water Science Center in Norcross, Georgia. You've heard from me and Senator Warnock our opposition. As I mentioned, there's tremendous public concern. Are you still planning to close that office?
Well, we'll certainly take this particular request under consultation, and our team will be in discussion with you and your team about that.
Okay, well, with respect, Mr. Secretary, this is an issue that I raised about a month and a half ago with you.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so when can I expect a response?
Soon.
Okay. Let me raise with you the ongoing bipartisan effort to establish Georgia's first ever national park. This is the Ocmulgee National Park and Preserve Initiative. Congressman Austin Scott, Republican in the House, and I are leading a bipartisan bicameral group of the Georgia delegation in order to establish Fish National Park and Preserve. For the first time, made major progress in the U.S. Senate last Congress on this effort. Overwhelming local support in the Macon area for getting this done. We've been grateful for the department's past support, providing technical assistance to help us move that forward. Will you continue to provide that support?
we're happy to engage with you and take a look at this proposal and this project.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, and my time has expired. I know you're getting up to speed and staffing up. Would appreciate more intensity of engagement on some of these Georgia concerns and look forward to sitting down with you and welcoming you to the state to work with you in Georgia's interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff.